Hello, welcome back. We are going to start the last 5 lessons of the semester. You have exam 2 behind, and now we are going to start lesson 10. We are still in the High Middle Ages. In fact, the same period that we have been talking about is the period of the Crusades, the 11th, late 11th, and then 12th and 13th centuries, which is exactly the High Middle Ages. So this lesson is very concrete, very specific. We are talking only about the Crusades, and we are going to analyze the way most historical events should be analyzed, analyzing the causes. Remember the 3 C's: causes, course, and consequences. And as I mentioned before, for any historical event, the causes and consequences seem to be even more important than the actual event, than the course of the event. So we are going to begin the lesson analyzing the causes. Then we'll talk about the first 4 crusades. We are not going to deal with the last 4. Official crusades were 8, even though there were some others that were like out of the official mandate by the Pope. And then we are going to focus on the results of the Crusades, both for the Western Europeans and for the Muslim world. So we begin then with the definition of the Crusades. What are the Crusades? And I want to clarify that even though popularly when people think of the Crusades, they think of holy wars, the Crusades were all but holy. In fact, they could be defined as military expeditions. And the military expeditions carried on by the Western European knights, and they went from Western Europe to the Middle East. The emperor of the Byzantine Empire, Alexios Komnenos, requested the military help of Western Europeans, and that's the real reason why the Crusades started, and that is the definition of Crusades. So they are military expeditions, and they are expeditions from Western Europe all the way to the Middle East. And this is the first overseas adventure that the Europeans had, and they of course are the first of many, because the Crusades, I guess, left in the European a taste of conquest. So we are going to start then by answering, actually by asking several questions, because when we try to figure out why did they happen, what caused this tremendous adventure, this effort, huge effort, economic, political, spiritual, psychological, what is it that made the Europeans decide to do that? And those are the questions that we are supposed to answer in this lesson. So what main questions am I going to ask you to answer? Well, these are some of them. What was happening in Europe during this time that led to the Crusades? What specific conditions or what specific events happened that made it possible for the Europeans to start the Crusades? At the same time, since the Crusades involved the Western Europeans, the Byzantine Empire, and the Muslim world, then we have to also figure out what was going on in Islam. The we talked about Islam in a previous lesson, but now we need to go back to Islam and figure out what was going on then at that time in Islam. And then the same with the Byzantine Empire. We know that the Byzantine Empire started as the eastern part of the Roman Empire. We left it for a while, and now we are going back to see what is happening there. Only because all the conditions were ripe for this historical event called the Crusades, we can understand why they happened. And then going specifically to the cause, what started the Crusades, we have to figure out why Alexios Komnenos, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, decided to ask for help. And he asked for military help. Don't forget that. He didn't ask for anything else. And he asked for military help, meaning he wanted the Western Europeans to fight with him, for him, and under him. That's what he requested. But as you study the Crusades, you are going to find out that the Crusaders did nothing like that. When the Crusaders decided to start fighting, they did not fight under the Byzantine Empire or under Alexios Komnenos. They went straight and fought the Muslims and defeated the Muslims. So this is in general some of the questions that we have to answer, but there are more specific questions related to the Western Europeans. For instance, why did the Pope and later popes, why did they decide to start something so, first of all, so violent, and second, so uncertain? Because the popes didn't know what the result was going to be, and the popes had a responsibility, a serious responsibility. So why is it that first Pope Urban and then the next popes, why did they encourage the Western Knights to do what they did? And then, of course, the other question, very important, is why did the kings of Europe choose to do that? And why did the kings decide to lead some of the Crusades? And then how did they convince the knights, all the Western knights, to participate? And why did the knights want to do it? Why were they so eager to go? So these are some of the questions that we need to answer as we analyze each of the Crusades. And I'm going to ask you to understand each of the first 4 Crusades. And the reason is each of those Crusades, of these first 4 Crusades, each of them has something interesting. From the perspective of success, we could say that only the first Crusade was successful in the sense of the Europeans organized their armies, went to the Middle East, fought the Muslims who lived and had lived in that region for centuries, and defeated them, took the main cities, and established Christian kingdoms, Western European Christian kingdoms. And these are the kingdoms that and notice that all the eastern Mediterranean coast was, as a result of the first crusade, was taken by the Crusaders, and for about 50 years there were European kingdoms in the Middle East, and these European kingdoms lived, were ruled, and had all the same institutions that the kingdoms in Western Europe had. So it was like just miniature European kingdoms that were there. So this is like the first crusade. And then once you understand some of the features of that first crusade and some of the results of that first crusade, how did the Muslims react? How did the Byzantine emperor react when he realized that they did not come to fight for him and that he was left out of the spoils of war? So all those questions we will have to answer when we analyze the first crusade. And then from there we will go to analyzing the second to the fourth crusades. And each, as I mentioned before, each of those crusades had something interesting. There are some figures, key historical figures that deserve our attention. And so I am going to ask you to focus on them. I believe you have a video on Saladin, and you also have extra additional information on Richard the Lionhearted. These are two very key figures in the Crusades. And then this is going to be also our introduction to an amazing woman that I'm sure maybe some of you will remember her for a long time. And if you have daughters, you may want to mention to your daughters what this woman did and who she was, because she is one of the most interesting historical figures of the Middle Ages. And then we are going to, as you analyze the second, the third, and the fourth crusade, look at the irony of the fourth crusade. Look at how in 100 and some years the spirit of the crusades had changed totally, to the point of the Western Europeans, instead of fighting the Muslims, ended up attacking and taking the city of Constantinople, the capital city of the Byzantine Empire. And of course that had serious consequences, both for the history of the Byzantine Empire itself, and also in the history of Christianity and in the history of Western Europe, of Western civilization. So it's going to be something that you will enjoy analyzing and focusing on. And then at the end of this brief look into the first four crusades, then the last part of the lesson we are going to analyze the consequences of the crusades, some short-term consequences and some long-term consequences. And as we analyze them, we have to look at what were the results of the crusades for the Muslims and what were the results of the crusades for the Europeans. And for the Europeans there are many interesting results. Now I have to warn you, some historians are not sure that some of the results that we mention, such as new fruits, for instance, or new customs like tableware, the use of tableware, or the fact that the monarchies became more powerful. Some historians say this would have happened anyway, with or without the Crusades. So they are not sure that they are direct result of the Crusades. However, we know that the Crusades helped because of the contact between the Europeans and the Muslim world, so we include them in the result of the Crusades. And then for the Muslims, many historians say the Crusades meant nothing for the Muslims. It was like a little mosquito that came to bother them, and then the mosquito was killed and nothing else happened. But many or most historians realize that the Crusades did have a long-term result. and that is the, I would not say hatred, but I would say antagonistic attitude toward the West from the Muslim world. The Muslims felt that the Western people in general were greedy, were savage. In the big picture, it did not cause a long-lasting result. However, the resentment existed, and if we can think of the artistic or architectural results, there are some beautiful castles that the Europeans built, and some of those castles still exist in the Middle Ages. So at least they left something positive from the time that they were there. And so this is the summary of the lesson. And as I said, it's very straightforward, and I'm going to ask you to try to understand every aspect of it and enjoy it. And then when you are done with it, as always, take your quizzes, take all your exams, and I will see you in the next guys, I was interrupted by a very handsome young man who is my grandson. I want you to look at him. That? They are my students and they are watching you now. So say goodbye to them.
Goodbye.
Good. Say goodbye to them.
Say goodbye.
And I will see you then in the next lesson.